talk about an unexpected premiere, that's for sure. Hey guys, come over for the season premiere of Mr. Robot Season 2, Episode 1. This was the first part of the season premiere, Unm4sk pt1.TC, and obviously I was so hyped for this premiere. As you guys know, Mr. Robot was by far one of my favorite shows of last year. It just surprised me so much, and it was so impressive, and just the way it was shot and everything about it. There's really nothing on TV quite like Mr. Robot, and just like Unreal, this show actually doesn't have an intro, so I can't put an intro before this video, unfortunately. But I was hyped out of my mind for this premiere, but I was also expecting that I review this episode on Wednesday, and that's not at all what happened. What they did here, I think, is really a genius move. If you guys don't know, there was supposed to be a Q&A for Mr. Robot, where the cast would come out, you know, answer a few questions, and about 20 minutes into the live stream, Fsociety hacks it, and basically they leaked the entire first episode on, and then just went away, and basically, that's why I didn't review Preacher. I was going to review Preacher, but then I realized this was on. I mean, I'm like, I gotta watch Mr. Robot, and finally, I did in fact watch this premiere. I'm saying finally, but really there is no finally because it came up so early, and this is only the first half of the episode. Keep in mind, I'm only reviewing the first episode. I'm not reviewing both episodes, but I just figured I had to review this. I'm not just gonna wait and not review it. I'm gonna review this. I mean, really, I've been waiting for this premiere for so long, and either way, guys, this was an incredible premiere. I love this premiere. There's so much great drama and consequence and things like that that's going on this premiere, and really, you can tell we're heading into even more darker territory, which I really did love. But let's just get into this episode because there's a lot to talk about. A lot went down this episode. I wouldn't say a lot went down, but definitely a lot of setup for the season, a lot of showing where we're going, and a lot of different directions that I really like the show is taking, because we then start off, you know, there were two big questions at the end of the finale last year. One, where the, you know, who was the one that knocked at Elliot's door? And two, where the fuck is Tyrell? And we start to get the first question answered in this episode. We see the Fsociety mask, and Lear takes it off, revealing it to be none other than Tyrell, and he asks why they use a mask because it's a bit silly, and we realize that this is before the 5-9 hack. We remember in episode 9, Tyrell confronted Elliot, and Elliot told him what was going on. We never saw the confrontation go down, and finally here it seems we've seen it, and basically he asks why they use this mask because it's a bit silly. He then gets a call from someone and says he understands and says he's aware of the request, but it needs to be removed at the moment. And this guy, he's on the phone with James, complies. Tyrell thanks him. We see Elliot starting the hack on 5-9, and Tyrell asks what it is. Elliot says it's happening, and Tyrell says it's almost as if something's come alive, and Elliot stares at his popcorn maker, and we don't really know what's going through his mind here. You know, what really happens here, we don't really know, but we do know that the last time that Elliot saw Tyrell was here. This was the last time he saw him. This is the last thing he remembers, and other than this, you know, we don't really know what's going on. I like that we don't know, you know, exactly what's going on, because that's something that Mr. Robot does very well, is that, you know, Elliot's not telling us anything else, because we kind of get the sense that he doesn't feel we deserve to, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but I think that overall is really interesting, and I've always loved the way that Mr. Robot plays with, you know, the narration, and the way that he's literally talking directly to us. I think they use that very well. I thought it was a very great way to start the episode, perfectly got us right into the mood, and really just sets the tone for how great this episode really was. But we then see a flashback to Elliot as a child, and I thought this was really interesting. If you remember in episode 2, we did hear this flashback when Elliot was talking to Mr. Robot. He talked to him about, you know, what we see here, that he's a child, he's fallen into the snow, and basically he's bleeding from his forehead, and of course this isn't the first time we've seen a flashback or anything, but it was still really cool to see, and he's bleeding his forehead on the roof. His parents run up to him in a panic. The doctor assures them from the images everything seems to be normal, which is good news because there were no lessons from the scans, and no lesions, I mean, from the scans, and no hemorrhaging or bleeding, and only a mild concussion and a few stitches. His forearm, however, is broken and will definitely need a cast, and his mom asks how much the copay will be, and the doctor says that's definitely something that she'll have to discuss with the billing department, and his mother says that Edward lost his job and there's no way to pay for all the bills, and of course we know that job he had in episode 9, you know, wasn't really the most successful job, and basically he tells him not to touch her, and she tells her not to touch him, actually, and basically Edward says that he told her that there won't be any more bills. The doctor tells them to step outside so he can talk to Elliot alone. They go outside, and the doctor says that he's going to be just fine. It was quite a spill he took today, but he promises he has a long and healthy life ahead of him, and I thought that was a really great contrast to what's going on. Now, again, remember how Elliot was as a kid, you know, those memories with his father, those were like the happiest moments in his life. That's when he he used to be this really just, had a really good life and actually enjoyed his life. And I think that's perfect contrast to what's going on in the present, because we're then very abruptly thrown back into the present. We see Elliot's lying in bed, which fantastic montage here of the song Daydream in Blue. I thought that was very well done. He's told by a woman that it's time to get up, and we don't know who this woman is, but she's there, and Elliot says that today started just like yesterday. And I like that we don't get, what we thought. I thought this episode was going to start off with the cliffhanger from last year of who was at the door, and I think we now know who's at the door. We'll talk about that a little bit, but he talks about how, everything says today just started like yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that, and every day for the last month. He says is perfectly constructed loop, and Elliot sees President Obama talking about the hack, which was interesting to see, the fact that this was such a big deal that the president is talking about this, but we realize this is really fucked over the economy. I mean, the economy really is in a terrible state, and the effect it will have on their economy in ways that are extraordinarily significant, and the FBI has confirmed that Fsociety and Tyrell were behind the attack. It caused a lot of damage, and they will respond partitionally and in a place of time that they choose, and it's a really well done scene, because throughout this whole montage, we hear Obama's voice throughout it, or at least an actor playing Obama, which I thought was really well done. He walks out, says his daily program begins with him eating breakfast with his new friend Leon, and I love this guy. This guy's really funny, and I think it's cool they did bring some dark humor here. Mr. Rowett's always done that very well. Let's have some really nice dark humor, and basically, Leon talks to him about an episode of Seinfeld, which he just discovered, and he talks about how it went way too much, and it's really fucking with him, but it's perfect for him because he doesn't have to say anything. He can just listen, and Elliot says at 10 a.m. he helps around the house, and at 12 p.m. he has lunch with Leon. He says at 2 p.m. they check out a baseball game, and Hot Carla at the local Pyre's usually there, and she becomes like his personal totem, and he still doesn't understand why people like sports. They get so emotional over the weirdest things, but he does see the beauty in the rules. The invisible code of chaos hiding behind the innocent face of order. And again, we know that Elliot, there are just things he doesn't understand. This is something he doesn't understand. He doesn't really understand, why people like sports, but he does understand, why, the kind of the chaos throughout it all, and really what they'll do here, I think, is overall really interesting. He says at 4:30 a.m., I'm sorry, 4:30 p.m., he cleans up around the house again, and at 6 p.m., he has dinner with Leon, then they eat most meals together, and Elliot says he never has to talk, and repetition is good for him. Now it keeps his regimen intact. He says 2 days a week he visits a church group. He doesn't really get the roles there either, but he needs to keep socializing himself. It's good for him, and these people at least seem normal, which of course he's anything but he himself wants to kind of have that normal life. You can definitely tell he's trying to construct something of a normal life, even though he has anything but, he's trying to do that. And Elliot says he's been keeping a journal, and it's the only way to keep his program running like it used to. He says he then goes to bed, and his mom, we realize, is the one that's there, and I am to assume that the one that knocked on his door was his mom, because this is a really unexpected direction, but I like seeing that he's living with his mom. We know how, I'm not going to say abusive, but we know that him and his mom didn't have the greatest relationship, but his mom has no computer or internet access to tempt him into the night. All that's left for him is just an ordinary analog, sleep ending the day's loop, and we may not think it's an ordinary way to live, but why not repeating the same tasks each day without having to think about them like everyone else does, keeping things on repeat to go along with their NCISs and Lexapro, and that's where it's comfortable in the sameness. We realize in the sameness, and we then realize that he's not actually talking to the audience here. He's saying all of this to Krista. And Krista here, I was really looking forward to, because as we know, Lenny approached her, of course, her ex-boyfriend, he approached her on going after Elliot. And you're wondering if she's going to. We don't hear anything about it in this episode, but I'm sure as the other episodes go on, we're going to hear about it. Nothing about it here, but basically, Krista asks why he went to his mom, and he says it's because she's the strictest person he knows, and she says that he's been attributed to a lot of childhood trauma from her, and he says it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And I get what he's trying to say, that it's better you know who the devil is than be unsure of who the devil is. He knows who his mom really is. He knows of the shit they've been through, and he kind of feels, I think he himself kind of feels like he's become the devil, definitely. And she asks if he feels alone. He says Leon comes by sometimes, and she asks if there's anything he missed about his old life. He says it doesn't matter, even if he did, and she asks why he'd say that, and he says it's because he can't trust himself back there, and she asks why he thinks he can't trust himself, and she says that she would like him to respond to her question. She says it took a lot for for her to talk to him after what he did, but she agreed with the condition that he was going to be more open with her, and she says she was very clear in what they discussed, and he says it's not that he doesn't trust himself, it's that he doesn't trust him, meaning Mr. Robot. That's who he doesn't trust, and I think that's a big part of this season, is really showing how Mr. Robot is not just this, conscience for Elliot. If anything, he's kind of destroying him. You definitely get the sense here, and I think that definitely is going to be one of the central themes of the season. We see Elliot then says, this time he's talking to us, he's not sure that we want to hear what he told Krista back there, but he's not ready to share just yet, not after what we did, keeping things from him. As we know, the whole reveal of Elliot, this was stuff that we already knew, and he said that we kept this stuff from him, and he doesn't know if he can trust us like before. Friends are supposed to be honest with each other, and we weren't, and it's going to take a while to rebuild this relationship. And Mr. Robot then appears, probably the worst thing that could happen. He's still seeing visions of Mr. Robot, even after he knows who Mr. Robot is, and that he's not really there. Mr. Robot is still in his life, and I get what they do. It's obviously Christian Slater, he's one of the best parts of the show, but it's also really getting into this idea of, does Mr. Robot do something that does mean that Elliot's doing something as well, which was really interesting overall. Mr. Robot talks about if he's talking to his friends again, and says he thought that they were done with all that, tells him to check out the newspaper, and tells him that he can't stay there because there's more work to be done, the revolution needs a leader, and what are they doing instead? Journaling. And he says Jacob Barr's rolling in his grave right now. He has to be, thinks it's going to get rid of him. He's not going to get rid of the zombie act. He's pulling it down. It doesn't work, and on them, and the control he thinks he has isn't, and the control he thinks he has is just an illusion. He really doesn't have much of any control, and really that's because Mr. Robot's always going to be a part of him. And Elliot says that he wants attention. He needs to tell what he wants to know, which is telling him where Tyrell is. And of course, Mr. Robot doesn't have the answer because Elliot doesn't know the answer, and he says he can't do that, and Elliot says, then go fuck himself. Mr. Robot then shoots him. He gets up, and obviously it didn't really do anything to Elliot, because he's not really there, and he asks if he's done, he gets up, and immediately goes back to journaling, and you can just tell that he really is just trying to repeat this cycle, and he's trying to stay in this recurring cycle, so his life is somewhat normal, which is just something that he's never going to have. Mr. Robot asks what's next on the roller coaster of regiment needle pointing, and Elliot continues to journal and writes down Mr. Robot just said to him. I thought that was overall really interesting what's going on there. We then see Fsociety, and they've really grown a lot. We don't really know what's going on here, but they go to this statue, they start to drill into it, and we saw something similar to this last year. I can't exactly remember what it was, but it was a scene that was very similar to this, and of course we know that Fsociety is willing to cause some vandalism. Whatever they need to do, they will cause, some damage if they have to. So we then get introduced to this character of Susan Jacobs, and this was a hilarious introduction. I don't really think they could have made this introduction any funnier than it was. She's running, she goes into her home, and her security alarm just goes off, watches on her TV, a man's being all about 5'9", she jumps into her pool for a swim, her power just goes out, and she then takes a shower as the water gets way too hot, starts to burn her. She gets out, suddenly her power comes back on, she gets a phone call, but she can't hear it since everything is going off at once. Her TV, the stereo, and the phone, and as funny as this was, you kind of get the sense this is Fsociety's doing. They're messing with her, and Susan asks what she's supposed to do. Nothing is working. Says to unplug what everything is inside the walls. That's how it was installed in the Smart House's package, and don't get a Smart House. Just don't. Why would you get a Smart House? I don't know. It's not a smart thing to do, and did we learn nothing from Click? Really, just don't get a Smart House. She says now the alarm is going off and it's freezing. It's below 40. Says she has a place in Greenwich and asks how long it's going to take before all this gets fixed. And Susan then leaves the house and everything continues to go off until everything just stops. And again, I feel that was just Fsociety messing with her, which is overall really interesting. Fsociety, meanwhile, we see is trying to find Darlene, who has stayed away from them, mainly because she, I think, kind of knows that they're not winning. I like seeing Darlene really taking forth as this leader, because Elliot, of course, he's kind of steered away, because he just feels that he doesn't really belong there, and he wants to get his life together, and he feels that that's not the place where he's going to get his life together, obviously. So I thought that overall was really interesting, and I just overall really did love the introduction to Susan Jacobs. Love what they did with her. I thought that overall was very well done. But Elliot then goes to what I thought was Allsafe, but it's not Allsafe. He meets with Gideon, of all people, who, Gideon, like I said, he's the one character that I continue to feel the worst for. As much as I feel for Elliot, Gideon's just this poor soul. Think about him. He was this boss that really loved his employees and really cared about his employees and really just wanted them to do well, and he was trying to battle Evil Corp and stop them from what they were doing, and unfortunately, things really have gone to shit for Gideon. Gideon says he hopes he doesn't mind he came by, asks him if something is wrong. Elliot says good to see him again. Gideon says he knows they didn't leave on things on the best of terms, and Elliot asks if it's true what he heard about Allsafe, and basically Gideon reveals that there isn't one. Allsafe is gone, and he says he had to furlough everyone. He's hoping to get it up and running again, but everyone's telling him to not bother. That's not going to do much of anything, and I just felt so terribly for him, because we know throughout last season he did whatever he could to keep this company, and I already predicted last season that there really was no saving Allsafe, and in fact there isn't. Allsafe is gone, and it really, I think, is pointing the show in a new direction, because as we know, Elliot had to live this double life of being at Allsafe and being a hacker, and that part of the show is now kind of over. He's no longer, hiding as as just a tech. That life is not there anymore, and I feel for Elliot that's kind of a relief, but also not a relief. For him, that was one of the most, that was one of the times when he got to be somewhat normal, and he felt like not like he belonged, but he felt like he was somewhat normal. He could blend into society, and now he can't do that as well because a part of his life is over, and you definitely do get that sense here. But there is a real reason why Gideon's there. He's not just there to talk to Elliot. Basically, we see Mr. Robot's there in this entire scene, pretty much taunting. Mr. Robot says he had a hard time figuring out whose fault this really was. Gideon says the FBI believes that he was behind the act or complacent in some way, and he's given them all the evidence he can and cooperate every step of the way, but they still keep coming at him, and they don't trust him. In fact, he thinks that they might be hacking his email. He knows someone is, and now he's wondering who that someone is, and Gideon says that the logins from times and machines he doesn't recognize, and Mr. Robot says if it was him, then that means it was Elliot, and asks if he could live with himself knowing that he framed Gideon, and just the way that he, like I said, he's taunting him, but he's also kind of being his conscience and saying that, you look, just come forward, admit that you did this, but Elliot can never do that. Elliot can never say this man's face, I'm the one that ruined your company, I'm the one that did this to you. He just could never look him in the eye, because I think deep down he knows that Gideon's a better man than him, and I think that's something that Elliot can definitely tell here, and basically Gideon and Elliot, Gideon says that the logins and time machines, and Mr. Robot says to tell him that he's slowly descending into madness, and there's only so many times before his bullets fully penetrate the thick skull of his and the blood trickles out. So does the sense of reasons. Round and round they go, him not knowing what he did or didn't do, their infinite loop of insanity. And Gideon asks if he knows anything at all, or if there's anything he can do to help him. And Gideon says that he needs him to, and Elliot says that he can't. There's nothing he can do. And Mr. Robot asks if he's really going to let him take the fall for this. A scared small animal, and Gideon says that that's unacceptable. Mr. Robot says that now he's doing what all small animals do when they get scared, pretending that they're bigger and scarier, and Gideon says if he's not going to do anything about this, he's afraid he's given him no choice but to go to them with what he knows, which given what he knows about the day he left, he says he's asking him one last time to do the right thing, and Mr. Robot says that he does have a point, knows a lot, perhaps too much. He says he wonders if he slit his neck right now, would it be him or Elliot doing it? Gideon says he's going to go to them and tell them everything, and he needs to understand that. And Mr. Robot says the truth is it doesn't matter. Out of all the choices he's been making, he adds up to one thing, and he literally slits Gideon's throat right then and there. And I'm like, holy shit, they just killed off Gideon. But no, they didn't. It didn't actually happen. This was in Elliot's mind, and that's something I don't really think we saw last year, is that the things that Mr. Robot does is not what Elliot did. I mean, I kind of got the sense that whatever Mr. Robot did is what Elliot's doing at the time, but no, it seems like that's not what's going on, that Mr. Robot is merely doing this to torture Elliot and show that I can do anything, and that what you're seeing is not really what you're seeing, and I'm always going to be this part of you, and basically, Gideon says he's going to go, and I thought overall that just was really interesting, and Elliot then realizes it's not really happening. His mother asks what's going on there. He then goes back to his journaling and says he's not going to lie. Gideon got him, but now is when he needs the regiment the most after all. That's the whole reason for doing the routine until he's gone, and once he's gone, he can finally be him again, and Elliot's then way, and I thought overall that was just really interesting, again, showing the way he's really taunting Elliot. But Elliot is then with Leon, who asks him about the head injuries, and in the middle of the conversation, he turns into Mr. Robot, and again, he's just getting more and more delusional, you see, and he says that Gideon's gonna rat him out. He probably already has. He can't ignore this. They have eyes on him, and this is how they work him, and Elliot says he's not gonna change his mind. He's sticking to his regiment, and Mr. Robot says he's not some tumor waiting to be excised. He's vital to his existence, and if he insists on keeping this up, he's gonna go from annoyed to hurt, and he does not want to hurt his feelings, and we don't know Mr. Robot's gonna do, but you get the sense that it's gonna get really bad if, he hurts his feelings. And Elliot asks how he takes off the mask and when it stops being on, and that's really why this episode's called a mask, because he feels like he's wearing a mask, but it's also a part of him, as he knows. And it's just a really complicated situation, because he knows this person's not really there, but he can't get rid of him, and when it's as much a part of him as he is. And Fsociety then celebrating their victory. Elliot says to keep finding the world like the world they unmasked. They will find their true selves again, maybe after wiping away the thick, grimy foam of Facebook friend requests and Vine stars. They can all see the light of day. He says he knows that we haven't talked to him in a while, and maybe we only trust him as much as he trusts us right now, but he needs us to have hope. And Darlene's then on the ground crying, kind of defeated, you see. She's kind of defeated, and she gets stressed. She really doesn't want to go to this party, and I love that everyone's partying, but she's not, because she knows the reality of the situation. She knows that they're losing, and she looks in the mirror, goes down, face everyone in the party, and the power that Darlene just has her, I thought was fantastic. And like Carly Chaiklin, I think her name is, she just killed it in this scene. She says to give her the phone. She throws it on the ground, destroys it, and she says that they are in a war, and they are on the losing side of it. They are their knees with guns to their heads, and they're picking them off one by one. She talks to them about Susan Jacobs, the general counsel at Evil Corp, and her nickname inside the company is Madam Executioner, and not just because she could kill any lawsuit filled against them, because those lawsuits usually involve deaths, and those are the cowards they are dealing with. And she says that they have been on their knees for too long, and it's time to stand up and make it a 4-hour SDR if necessary. Take surveillance detection stops, go into pharmacies, run errands, disrupt data points. They need to make sure that no one takes the same route there twice. She doesn't want anyone burning this location, and she doesn't want them to be found out, obviously. She's terrified that someone's going to come after them, and that someone is definitely going to find where they are. And I thought that just overall was really interesting, and just seeing the fear in Darlene, even though she was the one that felt victory and felt like they did something right, she now knows that it kind of made things worse, because Mobley then shows up, and he's one of the only ones left. They had this huge group, but only Mobley's one of the only ones that shows up, and she asks where everyone else is. He says he doesn't know. She says that they were always half in, and he says what she's doing there and what she's saying sounded like George Bush, and she says that's low, and to give her some credit, the speech is bullshit, but it riles them up, and she knows that. She knows that the speech really is ridiculous. And he asks to what end, sawing off balls, making protest signs, and he says that they accomplished something and took them down. And she asks, why does it feel they're still winning that? What they did make it worse, not better? Because she really feels like they're not winning, and it really seems like they've just made things worse. And she says that he knows that she's right. They didn't finish them off. That's all there is to people everywhere came out to support them. And right now they need to know that they haven't given up, that they meant what they said about change the world. And she tells them to not be in half like the others. And this thing they started deserves more than that. And he asks if she's seen Elliot. She says that's not important. This is everything right now. And she's not even focused on finding Elliot. She's completely focused on her work. And I really like that we saw that here. But then we end the episode at Evil Corp, or at least the first part of the episode. We end at Evil Corp. We see a woman's annoyed at her payments not being verified. Susan Jacobs comes in the boardroom to meet with Scott and Philip, and she says that she was on the phone with the FBI all night. They can't confirm the sender, but the email they received is authentic, more than likely the same hackers from the ransomware. And Scott asks what their demands are again. She says $5.9 million, which is insane, but they want that to be delivered to Battery Park City, 9 o'clock tonight, no police, and if they want to pay the ransom, the FBI will not sanction it. Scott says that they cannot negotiate with these people. Their techs are looking into it. They'll find a way to decrypt it and get the system. She asks how long. He says 5 days tops, and she said there's a lot of money for a drop day. She doesn't even want to mention the optics, and she says they can't afford this hack right now. She thinks they can find the money between their couch cushions. It's nothing, and her opinion as general counsel is to pay it, and you really get the sense that they're suffering just as much. Evil Corp is really suffering. They're losing money, and Phil asks about the other request they made, which is that they must send one of their chiefs and no one else, and she says that they mean one of their chief officers, and Scott says that these people are terrorists, pure and simple. Susan agrees and says they have no idea what these guys are capable of. Philip says that she's saying they should pay the ransom, but doesn't want any of them to do it, and she says that they can get one of their security officers to go undercover. Philip says that if they were to do that, then they'd be risking all this blowing up in their faces, and it's just a really difficult situation, because even though they feel that they're kind of winning, they're also losing. And I love that both sides think they're losing here. You know, Evil Corp feels they're losing and Fsociety feels they're losing because in many ways they are. And Philip says if they were to do that, they'd be risking all this blowing up in their faces. He says if they even want to consider doing this, they shouldn't give them any reason to do more damage. And Scott says that he'll do it. He's Chief Technology Officer. He qualifies that if they're gonna pay the bastards, he wants to be the one that faces them. And that is how this part of the episode ends. We then see the word intermission. It says if you want to stress the episode, you got to go to part 2. I'm not going to review part 2 in this video. I'll review part 2 in the next video, but that is how part 1 ends. And overall, I thought this was a fantastic premiere. I really did love everything about this premiere. I think there was just some great stuff going on here. A lot of dread and misery, but I think a lot of great consequence, because the big question that we still don't know is what the hell happened to Tyrell. I mean, we know that obviously there was a confrontation between Ellie and Tyrell. Did he kill Tyrell? Did Tyrell somehow get away? Is Tyrell hiding out? I mean, we don't really know. We know that even Joanna hasn't seen him, and I like that we didn't see Joanna or Angela in this episode. Those are like the two characters we didn't see. We saw everyone else, but we didn't see Joanna or Angela, which I thought was interesting that we didn't see them. I'm sure we'll see Angela in the next episode, but we didn't see her here, and especially because all the stuff that's going on there, I'm expecting we would, but I'm assuming we'll see them again in part 2. Again, this is just part 1. This isn't like the official, you know, full premiere. This is just part 1, but I am counting it as one episode because it says it's episode 1, so I'm going to count it as part 1. But overall with Elliot, I think really starting to realize what's going on with Mr. Robot, that Mr. Robot is just not going to go away. Mr. Robot is this part of him, and he's kind of torturing me. He's making him think things are going on that's not, especially with him slitting Gideon's throat, what's going on there. I think that overall is just really interesting, and is there a way to get rid of Mr. Robot? I don't know. I don't really think there is, and I think he wants to think there is, but I don't really know if there is a way to get rid of him, and the way they're kind of taking him in this more villainous direction, I really do like, because the first season, you saw him more as a father figure, you know, more of a conscience, and this season, he's more of a destructive, you know, bitter side of his conscience, really the worst parts of Elliot you can see are in Mr. Robot. All the possessive sides, you know, all the manipulative side, that's all in Mr. Robot's, and that overall is just really interesting, because Elliot even says that he can get back to being him again, and who is he really? I don't think he really knows right now. He doesn't really know who he is. Is Gideon gonna end up ratting on Elliot? We don't really know. I mean, he said he would, but is he really going to? We don't know. Fsociety is definitely in trouble right now. I don't know how this is all going to play out, if they're going to be able to get out of the situation. Evil Corp as well, are they going to be able to give the money to them? We don't really know how that's all going to turn out. I love the character of Susan Jacobs. I think they gave her some really good stuff to do in this episode. I really love what we saw with her here. She was just a lot of fun to watch. I definitely really loved her here. Definitely, I thought she overall was just really interesting. And then Krista. Krista, as we know, she's also doing research on Elliot. Is she going to continue this research? Is she going to go after him like Lenny said? Let's see how that all goes down. Overall, guys, absolutely love this premiere. This was everything I was hoping this premiere would be. I am so happy that they put the first episode online. I know this was only the first part of the premiere. I'm definitely looking forward to the second part. Obviously, can't wait till Wednesday. Definitely looking forward to seeing how this premiere ends, because I think it's going to be awesome to see. And I think this season, we're just going in a much more darker direction. I mean, last season was very psychological, definitely, but you can tell that they're not really changing things up necessarily, but they are expanding new territory, and I really do like that. This season, I think, is more about consequence than it is about victory. It's definitely showing more of the consequence and the negative things that can happen to things that sound like a good idea at the time, but now we're terrible, you know, really, in retrospect, were terrible ideas and should never have happened. I think we're definitely seeing that there. I also like the flashback we got here of Ellie as a child. Are we going to see more of that? I'm thinking that we are going to, but we'll have to see. But overall, guys, when you guys saw this episode, left your thoughts in it. I also, was his mother the one that knocked on the door? I mean, we still don't know, but I'm assuming she was, but we'll have to see the way that turns out. Let me know if you guys saw this episode, left your thoughts in it. We'll see you guys. Are you looking forward to the second part? And what do you think of the way this was done? Because for me, at first, I was really pissed off that they only did for a few hours, but I think it works really well because it's a hacker show, and, you know, they hack in everything, and they're supposed to be very sneaky about it, so I think it makes sense the way they did that. But let me know if you guys saw this episode, left your thoughts in it. We'll see you guys in my next video. Sorry I didn't get to review Preacher, but that will be my next review, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.